So today I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin MicroStrategy, what's going on, and why it's so glaringly obvious what's happening if you actually just objectively look at this. And I saw a quote the other day. It said, if you believe that Bitcoin is here to stay, you should probably get a seat in the arena. And I really think that there's a lot of people out there right now who kind of understand Bitcoin. They've heard of it before. They've seen the price go up. They understand as much that it's probably going to be here for a while, but they're still not holding any Bitcoin. So if you believe that Bitcoin's going to be around for a while, you should probably get a seat in the arena. You should probably get some skin in the game here. And the point of this video today is going to be talking about what's going on in Bitcoin, what's going on with MicroStrategy, and the bigger picture of how this is all kind of playing together and why it's absolutely insane right now to be holding zero Bitcoin. And I saw a comment yesterday on Twitter or YouTube or something saying, how much should I be allocating to Bitcoin? And I think the best answer to that, honestly, based on what's happening out there right now, is, as Michael Saylor says, you should only buy Bitcoin with the money you can't afford to lose. So whatever wealth, whatever capital, whatever time and energy you've accrued in your life, whatever you want to be there in 10 or 20, 30 years from now, that's what you hold in Bitcoin. Only buy Bitcoin with the money you can't afford to lose. And which is completely different. If you ask most financial advisors in the world right now, they would say something similar, but it would be only buy Bitcoin with the money you can afford to lose. That's how financial advisors see it. The people who have spent pretty much 0 hours learning about Bitcoin, that's what they would advise you. And you compare that to somebody who spent the last 4 years, probably 10, 12 hours a day, thinking about this, talking about this, going on mainstream news about this, building a whole new company, Bitcoin Treasury company, rebranding its 20-year company into a Bitcoin company. That's who you're comparing here. Somebody who spent 0 hours saying only buy Bitcoin with the money you can afford to lose, versus somebody who's tens of thousands of hours into this saying only buy Bitcoin with the money you can't afford to lose. So I'm going to talk about this here. I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I think that you're absolutely insane if you don't have any Bitcoin right now. So these are kind of no-brainers, I think. The first 2 here are going to be more so about Bitcoin itself. The third one's going to be tie in MicroStrategy into it. So the first one, I actually just learned this the other day, but Bitcoin is now a $2 trillion asset. Big picture, it's very small, but like it's still a $2 trillion asset. And there has never been a $2 trillion asset that has failed before. So if you're looking at this asset and you're thinking, well, I should probably allocate some, but I don't really want to lose that money. It might go to zero. But just understand the fact that there's never been a $2 trillion asset class that has failed before. 0 times in history that has happened. And I do not expect it to happen with Bitcoin. So that's the first one. The second one is that Bitcoin is the only asset to basically crash, full-on crash 4 times and recover to a new all-time high. So I'm going to share a few examples here of when this happened in the past. So it says Bitcoin has fallen and recovered to new all-time highs multiple times throughout its history. Based on the information available, there have been at least 4 significant crashes, followed by recoveries to new all-time highs. 2011, it crashed from $32 to 1 cent. 2013, it crashed from 260 down to 50. 2017, the crypto winter, it crashed from 20,000 to 3,300. And then in 2021, it crashed from 65,000 to 35,000. And after all 4 of those crashes, it recovered to a new all-time high. So this thing isn't a bubble. This is basically an asset that's trying to figure out what it's worth. 4 times. There's never been any other asset that has done that 4 times, crashed, and then recovered to a new all-time high. So that's 2 instances where Bitcoin has done something that nothing else has done before. And the third one here, and this is the most important one. The third one is that the big money in the world right now, they want to buy Bitcoin, but they can't. States are trying. I'm going to show a chart here. All the states in the US right now are fighting like hell to try to get Bitcoin on their own treasuries, on their own balance sheets. So let's look at this. This is the most recent state-by-state race going on in the US right now for Bitcoin strategic reserve. So you got Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Kentucky, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, South Dakota, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. And I think there's actually a couple more that have been added to since this was released. But there's a lot of big money out there right now who wants to buy Bitcoin. Oh, was I even showing the right screen there? Yeah, had to have been. But it's, they can't. They want to buy it, but they can't. And if you think about big money here, this is a cool little fact about Bitcoin. There's 63 million millionaires out there, and there's 21 million Bitcoin. So even if each millionaire on this planet wanted to buy one Bitcoin, they couldn't. It's pretty cool. But so let's talk about the big money, because we talked about the states. We showed the chart there, the race for Bitcoin, the strategic Bitcoin reserve. But let's talk about the big money. So let's look back to 2020 when Michael Saylor started buying Bitcoin for MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is a public company, and they announced in 2020 that they're going to start buying Bitcoin and adding it to their balance sheet. A couple years later, they basically turned into a Bitcoin treasury company. And yesterday, they rebranded into Strategy. So they currently hold 440,000 Bitcoin. And there's a lot of discussion on if anybody can catch them. Meta might be the best chance to do it. But I haven't heard any good arguments for somebody being able to actually catch MicroStrategy in terms of that number, 440,000 Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin turns into what we think it's going to, and you're holding the most of that asset, you're probably going to have some significant leverage in the future. So MicroStrategy could turn into a bank very easily. They might take 2% of their Bitcoin, turn it into a bank, and still have 98% of their treasury just being held in Bitcoin. That's the kind of stuff that they're going to have access to in the next decade or two. So Saylor looked at this. He was making money, but he was losing money because in the fiat world, inflation, they tell us, is 2%, but in reality, it's more like 15% per year. So you're sitting on all this cash. You can't do anything with it. You're basically just fighting to stay alive, even though you're a very profitable company. Because the fiat system is so broken, you feel like you're just barely keeping your head above water. So he started implementing Bitcoin, 440,000 in the last 5 years, 440,000 Bitcoin. So so let's just say, yeah, good for Saylor. He's got the most Bitcoin that anybody will ever have. Cool. Like, yeah, do I think he's smart? Of course. Do I think he's a genius? Yes, he's an engineer. He knows what he's doing here. But this isn't my opinion. It doesn't really nobody cares what I think. The most important part here is that the richest people on the planet think that he's right, think that he's smart, think that he's a genius. And I'm going to show you why. This is MicroStrategy's stock price in the last 5 years. So it's up 2,000%. Oh, sorry, 21,000 or 2,100% in the last 5 years. So back in 2021, basically when they just announced this strategy, you could buy a share in MicroStrategy for $11. It got up to, I think it was higher than that, but let's say $420 US, and it is currently at 336. So why? How could that happen? It's because the biggest, richest people on the planet agree with me here. And they're doing everything that they possibly can to hold this asset, but they can't. They can't hold Bitcoin. If you look at these hedge funds, if you look at these investment funds, these other public companies, these banks, governments, they cannot hold Bitcoin, but they want to. And that's why there's such a premium on this thing. So Why are people buying MicroStrategy? Essentially, that's what you have to ask yourself. Why would the price go up from $11 to $337 in 5 years if they're just holding Bitcoin? And so there's two people I think that are holding MicroStrategy shares right now. Number one, a small group of Bitcoiners who have a pension, a small group of Bitcoiners who have money trapped in that system. They're holding MicroStrategy. That's a very small percentage, though, especially consider the volume that MicroStrategy has been doing. They're top 10 in volume week to week. MicroStrategy, which hardly anybody on this planet has heard of before, they're top 10 in volume on the stock exchange. So that's the first group of people who are buying this is a small group of Bitcoiners who have a pension. The second one, though, is big money that cannot hold Bitcoin. So I'm going to give a couple examples of the people and entities who are currently holding MicroStrategy shares. So the first one here is Norway's central bank. Norges Bank, which manages the government pension fund of Norway, holds 1.1 million MicroStrategy shares valued at approximately $514 billion at the end of 2024. Is that right? 1.1 million MicroStrategy shares valued at $514 billion. That sounds high. But anyways, they hold 1 million MicroStrategy shares. The Central Bank of Norway. The Swiss National Bank owns 466,000 MicroStrategy shares. South Korea's National Pension Service purchased $34 million worth of MicroStrategy stock. Japan's major insurance company also owns MicroStrategy, and Goldman Sachs disclosed holdings of approximately 420 million worth of Bitcoin ETF shares, which may include indirect exposure to MicroStrategy. So that's why the big money in the world right now, and that's just a few small examples that people would recognize. I shouldn't say small. Norway's central bank, Swiss National Bank, they're holding MicroStrategy. Why? Because they can't hold Bitcoin. So MicroStrategy in this sense is basically like the canary in the coal mine that's telling you that all of this money locked up in the old system at central banks, at governments, pension funds, state funds, all of this money that's sitting there, it wants to buy Bitcoin. MicroStrategy itself is telling you that. They're using MicroStrategy as the vehicle to have direct exposure to Bitcoin. So all this is happening. The fact that it's a $2 trillion industry, no $2 trillion industry has ever failed before. The fact that it's gone up, it's crashed 4 times and came back and recovered to an all-time high 4 times. And the biggest money on the planet wants it so bad that it's willing to pay over 2x for it. That's what the premium is right now to own MicroStrategy shares versus just buying Bitcoin. That's how much demand there is from the biggest capital on the planet who wants access to Bitcoin. They're using MicroStrategy as that vehicle. So in this sense, MicroStrategy is like the warning that the average person should be paying attention to this, because the biggest capital in the world wants Bitcoin, but they can't buy it yet. And that's why we're seeing so much action in MicroStrategy, because it is the vehicle right now for them to hold exposure to Bitcoin. So, and then the crazy thing is, so all that went down. Saylor announced this. He turned into a Bitcoin treasury company. He accumulated 440,000 Bitcoin. But then he's basically saying, while this whole thing played out, he's been saying, he's been doing tours across the mainstream news. He's been on every Bitcoin podcast. He's been shouting this from the rooftop for the last 4 years. And he's been saying that when these 3 things happen, it changes everything for Bitcoin. It's over essentially. And those 3 things were, there's a Bitcoin ETF, which has happened. The second one was that the FASB rules changed, that they changed the way that they value Bitcoin on public company balance sheets, which changed, and they're going to be implementing for Q1 2025, which is where their $12 billion gain on Bitcoin is going to show up. So the second one was the FASB rules. And the third one was the SAB 121 gets revoked. which essentially allows banks to now custody Bitcoin. So in the last 365 days, all three of those things have happened. So Saylor's been talking about this all over the place. He's been saying these three things over and over and over again. When these three things happen, Bitcoin's going to explode. And all three of those things have officially happened. There's a Bitcoin ETF. The FASB rules changed where companies are now allowed to hold Bitcoin for what it's actually worth on their balance sheet. I know, crazy concept. And the SAB 121 rules have been changed, where banks are now able to custody Bitcoin. And a couple days after the third thing happened there, Saylor comes out with this brand new rebrand called strategy.com. So MicroStrategy has now become strategy with a B at the end of it, which there's a lot of people who think that that B is going to be short for Strategy Bank in a couple of years from now. So they have 471,000 Bitcoin. I was 30,000 short there. 471,000 Bitcoin. So they're basically a Bitcoin company now. And if you talk to anybody out there, even people who have heard of MicroStrategy before, everybody just thinks that it's either a Ponzi scheme or it's basically just a Bitcoin holding company. So just to kind of, I wanted to highlight a couple different things here. Number one, obviously, is the Bitcoin aspect of this. Bitcoin is the real thing that matters here because MicroStrategy is irrelevant without Bitcoin. Bitcoin is what we're focused on here. MicroStrategy is a really good play if you have any money in the old system, any capital that's basically trapped in a retirement fund, something like that. MicroStrategy is a play. But the point of this is just to show you that all of these things, this is the whole ecosystem here. The $2 trillion, no market cap of $2 trillion has ever failed before. The crash 4 times, recovered to all-time high, never happened before. And of course, the canary in the coal mine here, which is MicroStrategy, which is telling you that the biggest money in the biggest money in the world desperately wants to buy Bitcoin. And they're buying MicroStrategy shares instead. That's why there's such a premium on there. MicroStrategy is essentially the only highway that's open for that capital to buy Bitcoin. And for the average person, you still have the ability to essentially front run the whole world, the biggest capital in the world. You still have the ability to front run them. They're telling you, they're making it very obvious that they want this. They can't have it yet, but they want it. And so you might say, well, why can't they have it? Why can't they just hold Bitcoin? Well, if you look at their actual regulations and their shareholder agreements and all this stuff, there's certain assets that they can hold and certain assets that they can't hold. And Bitcoin, for the most part, is not an asset that these entities can hold. That's why they're using MicroStrategy. And that's why you should be using MicroStrategy as that canary in the coal mine to tell you what's coming here. And again, the average person still has the chance to actually make a significant dent in Bitcoin here. Not going to be around for long. Again, all three of those things have been satisfied. States are racing to buy it. Countries are racing to buy it. We're just kind of at the starting line right now. It's just starting right now. And so if you have any ability at all, I'm not telling you to take on debt. I'm not telling you to sell your house or completely cash in your pension, but you should 1,000% be doing everything that you can to get as much Bitcoin as you can right now. Cash in your old savings account, sell some jackets around your house, sell your old snowboard, take whatever you can and buy as much Bitcoin as you possibly can, because we will never, ever be able to buy Bitcoin for these prices again. And once it starts running away, we're never, ever going to be able to catch it. That's why I said when the states, and especially when the US government starts buying Bitcoin, if you're a Bitcoiner, take a screenshot of your account. Look at your total amount of Bitcoin that you have. The dollar amount will go up significantly, but the actual Bitcoin amount will probably not change, just because when all this happens, you're not going to be able to get hardly any sats for dollars anymore. It's just going to be so insignificant in compared to what you've already been able to accumulate. So there is urgency here. There's a lot of urgency right now. And I hope this video finds you in some way and you understand what's happening and you can just take a small risk, a small step here, and just get some Bitcoin. I'm telling you, this is the canary in the coal mine. MicroStrategy is the canary that's warning you. All this money is going to flow into Bitcoin, and you still have a small chance to get a portion of that. You might end up with more than one of the 63 millionaires out there right now. The whole system is basically going to flip. When everything gets repriced and Bitcoin becomes the new reserve currency of the world, everything's going to flip. You might have $1 million, but how much Bitcoin do you have? That's the only thing that's going to matter.